Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on an object that you have almost certainly seen, probably owned at some point, and, let's be honest, likely completely ignored. We are talking about a $15 plastic watch that is hiding some absolutely incredible global secrets. The Casio F-91W represents what is perhaps the single most significant paradox in the entire history of modern functional design. Because, on the surface, it's just a cheap, throwaway consumer electronic. But when we actually look a little closer, we uncover a global cultural artifact, one that's worn by literally everyone from tech hackers and Hollywood stars to special operations forces and high-level intelligence operatives. So let's peel back the layers of this wildly fascinating device.
100 million. Just think about that number for a second. That represents the staggering estimated production scale of the Casio F-91W by the year 2026. This isn't just some popular watch. We're talking about a truly universal human artifact. To put that into perspective, Casio churns out roughly 3 million of these units every single year. It has achieved a level of market saturation that's really only comparable to the iPhone or, say, the classic Volkswagen Beetle. But it begs the question, how does a completely basic, totally unchanged digital watch maintain this massive momentum in an era of hyper-advanced smartwatches?
Well, to really understand this watch, we have to acknowledge its strange double life. It's a device that is simultaneously invisible, because it's just everywhere, yet somehow notorious due to its highly classified and frankly sometimes dark geopolitical history. To understand exactly how it achieved this remarkable, paradoxical status, we need to go back to the very beginning, right to its foundational design.
All right, Layer 1, the ubiquitous plastic watch. Back in 1989, a designer named Ryusuke Moriai, who, fun fact, would actually later go on to shape the iconic G-Shock line, wanted to create a functional, no-nonsense timekeeper. Something that felt like an invisible extension of the wrist, completely rejecting the bulky luxury of mechanical watches. And he succeeded brilliantly. Weighing in at a mere 21 grams and sitting at an ultra-slim 8.5 millimeters thick, it easily slips under a shirt cuff or a tactical jacket without snagging on anything. And because of this, it appealed to absolutely everyone, from scrawny hipsters wanting a retro aesthetic to manual laborers needing a tool that wouldn't get in the way, right up to special ops soldiers carrying 60 pounds of gear who desperately value an ultralight, snag-free timepiece.
Moving deeper, we hit Layer 2, engineering a $15 masterpiece. Underneath that iconic matte black resin case is where we find the watch's serious silicon architecture, known as Module 593. Now, in a tech world where devices are constantly replatformed and updated every year, Casio has maintained this exact quartz-driven architecture for over 35 years to achieve legendary power efficiency. But here's the really clever part. Notice what's missing from the calendar feature: leap year logic. Casio engineers purposefully stripped away complex computing tasks, like tracking the specific year or calculating leap years, to minimize the size of the digital logic on the silicon die. By doing this, the watch only has to wake up for a fraction of a millisecond to update the display. This extreme efficiency is exactly what guarantees a massive 7-year life out of one single tiny CR 2016 lithium battery.
And this right here is where the engineering gets truly impressive. Even at a $15 price point, Casio uses microscopic trim jumpers directly on the printed circuit board. Since every quartz crystal oscillates just a little bit differently, these physical jumpers allow factory workers to specifically calibrate the silicon to perfectly match the unique quartz crystal inside that specific watch. Officially, Casio says it's accurate to plus or minus 30 seconds a month, but in the real world, users frequently observe accuracy of around 6 seconds a month. That literally rivals incredibly expensive luxury chronometers.
Now we have to peel back to Layer 3, the terrorist timepiece. This requires a bit of a shift in tone, as we look at a much darker chapter in the F-91W's history, perfectly highlighting the reality of dual-use technology in modern asymmetrical warfare. Impartially reporting the facts from declassified intelligence files, both the CIA and MI6 documented the watch's frequent use as a highly precise detonation trigger for improvised explosive devices. Because it had such a reliable daily alarm and countdown feature, it could easily be wired to a circuit board and a 9-volt battery. In fact, it was so prevalent in this specific role that briefing documents used to train interrogators at Guantanamo Bay literally labeled possession of the F-91W as the sign of Al-Qaeda.
150. That is the number of times Casio watches were explicitly mentioned in detainee assessments from Guantanamo Bay. Intelligence reports suggested that the watch was actively handed out to recruits at bomb-making training courses in Afghanistan. It was even famously worn by Osama bin Laden himself in public videos, making it one of the very few Western-branded items he was ever actually seen wearing.
But this creates a massive intelligence paradox, something often called a false positive. You see, the watch was so completely ubiquitous around the globe that using it to flag terrorists also inadvertently flagged millions of innocent civilians. Actually, the irony here is that it flagged the very soldiers and intelligence officers who were hunting the terrorist, because the F-91W was also a massive favorite among Allied military personnel. It's a perfect illustration of dual-use technology, a highly effective civilian tool that just happens to work incredibly well for paramilitary operations. Which brings us to Layer 4, fakes and counterfeits. I know, it sounds totally absurd to counterfeit a $15 watch. Like, why even bother, right? Well, the answer is simple economics. The massive global volume makes it a highly lucrative black market. Counterfeiters can punch out fake versions for just a couple of dollars, and since it's the highest-selling watch in the world, they can move millions of them to unsuspecting buyers. So if you want to perform a quick forensic audit of your own watch to see if it's the real deal, here's what you do. Check the caseback screws. Genuine Casio screws have a slot extending all the way across, so you can use a flathead or Phillips screwdriver, while the fakes only use cheap Phillips screws. Inside, genuine modules are wrapped in a protective metal cage, but honestly, the absolute easiest tell is the screen. Genuine F-91W displays actually look crisper when you view them at a sharp angle, whereas fakes suffer from severe LCD ghosting, which makes all the unlit numbers look like dark, muddy shadows. But get this. Casio actually built in their very own anti-counterfeiting Easter egg. If you press and hold the right button for 3 seconds, the screen will drop all the numbers and literally display the word Casio. For years, this was the ultimate party trick to prove your watch was genuine. Though, heads up, modern counterfeiters are highly adaptable, and many of them have finally figured out how to clone this exact step in their fake silicone modules too.
Finally, we reach the core of the onion. Layer 5, cult status and modding.
Stepping completely outside of the traditional watch enthusiast space, the runaway success of that 593 module spawned a whole ecosystem of cousins. Casio realized they could cater to completely different aesthetics while keeping that perfect digital brain intact. So you've got the A58W for folks who want a more formal metal look. Then there's the F-105W, which thickens the case just a bit to add a brilliant electroluminescent backlight instead of the classic kind of dim green LED. And the W59, which rounds the corners off and adds 50 meters of water resistance. But the cool part? They all share that exact same, highly efficient soul.
And this universal appeal naturally bled right into pop culture. We're talking about a young pre-presidency Barack Obama wearing it to project an image of pragmatic accessibility. Then you have the character of Napoleon Dynamite in 2004, using it as a prop for his perfectly awkward, out-of-time persona. Right up to modern media like Stranger Things using it to anchor us firmly in the 1980s. The watch has basically become the ultimate normcore accessory. It's this anti-fashion statement that perfectly signals an unassuming, authentic identity that completely refuses to chase luxury trends.
And let me tell you, the maker community loves this thing just as much as Hollywood does. Hardware hackers have actually started something called the Sensor Watch Project. They are literally ripping out the original Casio circuit board and installing custom boards featuring a modern microchip SAM L22 microcontroller. It's wild. This effectively turns a 1989 plastic relic into a programmable wrist computer. Users can write their own custom firmware to add temperature sensors, track multiple time zones, or even calculate moon phases, all while keeping that indestructible classic resin shell. But wait, it gets crazier. Perhaps the most extreme modification out there is hydromodding. Because liquids are virtually incompressible, modders figured out that by opening up the F-91W and filling the internal cavity entirely with mineral oil, they could effectively immune the watch against deep-sea pressure. In one seriously incredible test, modders strapped an oil-filled $15 F-91W to a Navy remotely operated vehicle and successfully sent it nearly 5,000 meters deep without the screen crushing. No way, right? But it returned to the surface, keeping absolutely perfect time. Which brings us to the ultimate paradox. We live in a world that is obsessed with complexity. We willingly fork over $800 for smartwatches that feature planned obsolescence and batteries that inevitably degrade in just 3 years. Yet right here is a watch designed back in 1989, costing less than a large pizza that survives extreme ocean depths, runs for nearly a decade on a tiny battery, and offers accuracy that rivals Swiss luxury. So it leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. In our modern, hyper-connected, disposable world,
Is it possible that the ultimate luxury is actually true, enduring, and honest functional design? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Next time you spot that little black plastic strap on someone's wrist, you'll know exactly what kind of history it's hiding.